The first time my sister locked me out of the family business, she called it a misunderstanding. She said it casually, standing in the parking lot behind the building our parents' names were still etched into. Keys dangling from her fingers, like proof that nothing had really changed. There must have been a mix-up with the access codes, she said. I'll have IT fix it. It was 9:30 on a Monday morning. I had been late only once in 7 years, and even then, I'd called ahead. That morning, I stood outside in my coat, laptop bag on my shoulder, watching employees I had trained walk past me without making eye contact. My name is Natalie Crowell. I was 32 years old when I realized that loyalty, when left unguarded, can be used against you like a weapon. The company was called Crowell Outdoor Supply. My parents started it in the early 90s out of a rented garage in upstate New York. Camping gear, workwear, eventually a small but loyal regional brand. By the time they retired, the company employed over 100 people and turned a steady profit. Nothing flashy, just solid, reliable. Like them, I joined the business right after college. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I worked my way up slowly, deliberately. Inventory, vendor contracts, logistics. I didn't skip steps. I learned how the place ran, from the inside out. My sister Amanda joined later. She was 3 years older than me, and had always moved through life like the world owed her an audience. She went to a better school, married earlier, talked louder. When she joined the company, it was straight into marketing and strategy. She liked titles. She liked meetings. I liked results. When our father had a stroke 2 years ago, everything shifted. He survived, but he never fully returned to work. Our mother followed 6 months later. Cancer. Fast. Brutal. The kind that doesn't negotiate. Amanda handled the funeral arrangements. I handled payroll. That should have told me everything. The morning I was locked out, I called Amanda twice. No answer. I texted. No response. Finally, I called my mother's old assistant, Diane, who still worked part-time. "Natalie," she said quietly, "Amanda told us you'd be working remotely for a while." I felt something cold move through my chest. "I never said that," I replied. Diane hesitated. "She said you needed space." I hung up without correcting her. By noon, my company email access was restricted. Not shut down, just limited. I could read messages. I couldn't send them. My name still appeared on internal documents, but approvals were routed elsewhere, to Amanda. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. Our father was asleep in the living room, television on but muted. He looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way that made anger feel almost inappropriate. Amanda stood in the kitchen, pouring wine. "You should have told me," I said, "before you started changing things." She didn't turn around. "Changing what?" "Access. Authority. My role." She finally faced me, smiled like we were discussing paint colors. "You've been under a lot of stress," she said. "I thought this would be easier." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," she replied, "including you." I waited for more. An explanation, an apology, anything that suggested this wasn't intentional. Nothing came. "You don't get to decide that," I said. Amanda took a sip of wine. "I do now." The words were soft, almost bored. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan that had never worked properly. I thought about all the years I'd said yes without asking why. All the times I'd stayed quiet because it felt easier. I didn't feel betrayed yet. I felt repositioned. And the next morning, Amanda acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee, burnt toast. The same routine she'd followed for years whenever she stayed at the house. She spoke to me about neutral things, weather, traffic, a neighbor's renovation. Our father slept through all of it. I watched her carefully, the way you watch someone who has already made a decision and is now waiting for you to catch up. There was no urgency in her movements, no guilt, just control, settling in. "I'm going to the office," I said. She didn't look up. "You don't need to." "I do," I replied. She sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "Natalie, we talked about this." "We didn't," I said. "You informed me." She tilted her head slightly, the way she always did when she was about to frame something as concern. "The board agrees. You should step back for a bit." The board. That word landed harder than the locked door had. "What board?" I asked. Amanda smiled. The advisory board. Mom and Dad set it up last year. I knew that wasn't true. Our parents had discussed it, casually, but nothing had been formalized. No paperwork, no votes. You don't have the authority, I said. She shrugged. I have enough. I left without another word. At the office, the front desk receptionist hesitated when she saw me. That was new. She used to greet me by name. Hi, Natalie, she said, uncertain. Amanda asked that all scheduling go through her this week. I'm not here to schedule, I said. I'm here to work. She bit her lip. I'll let her know you're here. I didn't wait. I walked through the building, past familiar faces that suddenly seemed unsure of how to acknowledge me. Some nodded politely. Others looked away. One man I'd trained years ago opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. I reached my office and found the door locked. Not just locked. My nameplate was gone. In its place was a temporary sign. Operations. Interim. Interim. I stood there for a long moment, my hand hovering over the handle. Like if I waited long enough, the door might unlock itself. It didn't. That afternoon, I sat in my car and made a list. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just facts. I had worked at Crowell Outdoor Supply for 7 years. I had signed contracts. I had authority. I had emails. I had witnesses. And I had parents who were no longer capable of intervening. Amanda knew that. That was the point. That evening, she came home late. Her heels clicked across the kitchen tile, confident, unhurried. I spoke to the lawyer today, she said, pouring herself another glass of wine. What lawyer? I asked. Our parents' estate attorney, she replied. Just to make sure everything's protected. Protected? I nodded slowly. Did you mention that you locked me out of the company? She waved a hand dismissively. It's temporary. Everything permanent starts as temporary, I said. She smiled thinly. You're overreacting. I looked at her then, really looked at her. At the ease with which she dismissed me. At how naturally control sat on her shoulders. You're not worried at all, I said. About what? She asked. About being wrong, she laughed. Natalie, you've always been good at the details. I'm good at the big picture. And where do I fit into that picture? I asked. She took a sip of wine. You don't need to. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and thought about the years I'd mistaken proximity for trust. About how often love gets confused with access. By morning, something in me had settled. I didn't confront Amanda again. I didn't argue. I called a lawyer. Not the family one. A corporate attorney in Albany I'd worked with once on a vendor dispute. Her name was Rachel Myers. Efficient. Unsentimental. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, You're not being pushed out. You're being boxed out. What's the difference? I asked. One is emotional, she replied. The other is actionable. That afternoon, Rachel requested copies of company bylaws, shareholder agreements, and any documentation regarding authority changes. Amanda didn't know yet. She thought time was on her side. She thought silence meant compliance. She thought wrong. Because the more she moved pieces around without me, the clearer it became what she was trying to build. And the clearer it became that I wasn't going to step aside quietly. Not this time. Not after everything I'd already given. By the end of the week, Rachel called me back. There's something you need to see, she said, and you're not going to like it. She paused, but you're going to need it. And just like that, the ground shifted again. Rachel didn't send the documents by email. She asked me to come to her office instead. That alone told me this wasn't about a technicality or a missing signature. Lawyers only ask you to sit down when the truth needs context. Her office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building near the river. Nothing flashy. Bookshelves sagging slightly from use. A coffee ring on one legal pad she hadn't bothered to hide. She didn't offer small talk. Your sister filed an amendment, she said, sliding a folder toward me. Dated 4 months ago. I frowned. An amendment to what? To the company operating agreement, Rachel replied. Specifically, the section governing decision-making authority during medical incapacity. My stomach tightened. Our parents never signed that, I said. No, she agreed. They didn't. She opened the folder and pointed to the page. Amanda's signature was there. So was a notary stamp. But the date was wrong. And the witness line was empty. She filed it as an emergency provision, Rachel continued. Claimed your father verbally approved it after his stroke. That's a lie, I said quietly. Yes, Rachel replied. It is. The room felt suddenly smaller. What does it do? I asked. It temporarily consolidates operational authority, she said. Under one acting director, your sister. How temporary? I asked. Rachel looked at me carefully. Until the board votes otherwise, or until the parents regain full capacity. They won't, I said. I know, she replied. I stared at the document. The language was subtle, polite. It didn't erase me, it just paused me, suspended my ability to approve contracts, sign checks, access internal systems. It was control without confrontation. When did she file this? I asked. Rachel checked her notes. The week your mother started chemotherapy. I closed my eyes. Amanda hadn't acted out of panic. She had acted while everyone else was distracted. Is it enforceable? I asked. Rachel leaned back. That depends on what you want to do next. I didn't answer right away because suddenly, a dozen small moments clicked into place. Amanda insisting on handling hospital paperwork. Amanda volunteering to speak to the accountant. Amanda telling me to focus on Mom while she took care of logistics. She hadn't taken over suddenly. She'd taken over quietly. What are my options? I asked. Rachel folded her hands. We can challenge the amendment. That would require proving misrepresentation and improper notarization. How long? I asked. Months, she said. Possibly longer. And in the meantime? I asked. You remain sidelined, she said. Legally. I nodded slowly. There's another option, Rachel continued. Less confrontational. More strategic. I looked up. I'm listening. She slid another document toward me. This is the original operating agreement, she said. The one your parents signed when the company incorporated. I recognized it immediately. I'd referenced it dozens of times over the years. Section 12, Rachel said. Right here. I read the line twice before it registered. In the event of a dispute between designated directors resulting in operational harm, any director may request an independent fiduciary review, triggering temporary oversight by a neutral third party. I looked up. You're saying I can force a review? Yes, Rachel said, without confronting her directly. What happens during the review? I asked. All authority freezes, she replied. No changes, no transfers, no unilateral decisions. And who conducts it? I asked. A court-appointed fiduciary, she said. Usually a retired judge or CPA. I sat back. Amanda wouldn't see that coming. Would it look hostile? I asked. Rachel smiled faintly. It would look procedural. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel near the office and sat by the window, watching traffic move below like nothing in the world had changed. I thought about my sister as a child, how she used to take the bigger slice of cake without asking, how she always assumed I'd adjust. I thought about my parents, about how they trusted us to work together, about how Amanda had used that trust as cover. By morning, my decision was made. I didn't tell Amanda what I was doing. I didn't warn her. I didn't argue. I signed the request. Rachel filed it that afternoon. The notice went out the next day. Formal, neutral, unavoidable. Amanda called me within an hour. What did you do? She demanded. I followed the agreement, I said. You're trying to embarrass me, she snapped. No, I replied. I'm trying to stop you. Silence crackled on the line. You think you're smarter than me, she said finally. No, I said. I think I'm done trusting you. She hung up. 2 days later, the fiduciary arrived at the office. And just like that, Amanda's quiet takeover hit a wall she couldn't charm, spin, or step around. But I knew better than to relax. Because when people lose control quietly, they don't always respond quietly. And Amanda had never been good at losing. The fiduciary's name was Thomas Harlan, 72 years old, former appellate judge, soft voice, eyes that missed nothing. He arrived at the office on a Thursday morning with a single briefcase and no interest in office politics. He introduced himself to the staff, explained the scope of the review in plain language, and asked for a conference room with a door that closed. Amanda didn't greet him. That alone was telling. I watched from the hallway as Harlan took his seat at the long table, unfolded his notes, and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Finally, Amanda swept in, phone still in hand, heels clicking sharply against the floor like punctuation. I'm sorry, she said brightly. I was on a call with a distributor. Harlan nodded once. We'll begin. He didn't ask her to sit, He didn't acknowledge the apology. He asked for documents. Profit and loss statements, vendor contracts, authority logs, email correspondence related to operational changes. Amanda smiled at first, confident, polished. But as the requests continued, something shifted. She hadn't prepared for this kind of scrutiny. The fiduciary wasn't interested in narratives. He wasn't interested in intentions. He wanted timelines, authorizations, consistency. And Amanda's story had gaps, small ones, but enough. Why was this amendment notarized without witnesses? Harlan asked calmly. Amanda laughed once, too quickly. It was an emergency. And why was your sister not notified? He continued. She was unavailable, Amanda replied. Harlan looked at me. Were you? No, I said. He nodded, wrote something down. The review continued for days. Employees were interviewed privately. Diane, the accountant. 2 department heads who had assumed Amanda's authority was temporary and fully sanctioned. It wasn't. By the end of the week, Amanda stopped coming into the office early. She arrived later each day, left earlier, her confidence thinning around the edges. Her phone calls grew sharper. Her smile became brittle. At home, the tension followed us like smoke. She accused me of sabotage, of disloyalty, of trying to steal what wasn't mine. I didn't respond. I cooked dinner. I took care of our father. I let the process do what it was designed to do. One evening, as I was washing dishes, Amanda leaned against the counter and said quietly, "You know this is going to change things forever." I didn't look up. "They already have," she scoffed. "You think Mom and Dad would want this?" I turned off the water and faced her. "They would want honesty," I said. "You chose control." Her face tightened. "I chose survival." "So did I replied. "The difference is, I didn't erase you to do it." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she walked out of the room. The following Monday, Harlan requested a private meeting with me. He closed the door and removed his glasses. "Your sister has been acting outside her authority," he said. Repeatedly. I nodded. "There's more," he added. "She authorized a line of credit against company assets." My heart skipped. "When?" 2 weeks ago, he said, while the review was pending. "That's not allowed," I said. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He slid a document across the table. Amanda's signature. Another emergency justification. Another assumption that no one would stop her. "What happens now?" I asked. Harlan folded his hands. "The review escalates. Her authority is formally suspended." I exhaled slowly. "And me?" I asked. "You remain," he said. "As you always were." The notice went out that afternoon. Amanda's access was revoked. Temporarily, but officially. She was instructed to cease all operational involvement until the review concluded. She didn't come home that night. When she returned the next morning, her eyes were red, her movements rigid. "This isn't over," she said flatly. I met her gaze. I know, but something had shifted. The power she'd taken quietly had been removed quietly, and people like Amanda didn't forgive that. They waited. And I had a feeling the next move wouldn't be procedural. It would be personal. Amanda didn't fight the suspension the way I expected. No shouting, no dramatic appeals, no frantic calls to lawyers she could name drop. She went quiet. That was more unsettling than anything else she could have done. For the first few days after the notice, she barely spoke. She stayed in her room when she was home, left early, came back late. When she did speak, it was clipped, polite, almost distant, like a stranger renting space in the same house. That version of Amanda scared me more than the angry one, because silence was how she planned. At the office, Thomas Harlan's presence changed everything. People stopped guessing, stopped whispering. Authority became visible again, structured, documented. Emails were copied properly. Decisions required signatures. Meetings had agendas. I returned to work without ceremony. No announcement, no apology tour. I simply walked back into my office, unlocked, my nameplate returned exactly where it had been. Some people smiled. Some avoided eye contact. A few nodded in quiet relief. No one clapped. That was fine. I didn't need recognition. I needed stability. Midweek, Diane stopped by my office and closed the door behind her. "I should have said something sooner," she said, hands folded tightly in front of her. "About what?" I asked. "About Amanda," she replied. about how she was asking for things, pushing, framing everything as urgent. I watched her carefully. Why didn't you? She hesitated. Because your mother trusted her, and because I assumed you were aware. I nodded. That was the problem, wasn't it? Everyone assumed someone else had consented. You're not in trouble, I said. But I need you to tell Harlan everything, even the parts that feel uncomfortable. She nodded. I already have. That afternoon, Rachel called. They've uncovered discrepancies, she said. Nothing criminal yet, but questionable enough to matter. Such as? I asked. Expense approvals that bypass standard review. Vendor agreements fast-tracked without competitive bids. And one personal reimbursement that shouldn't have been classified as business. My jaw tightened. What kind of reimbursement? Rachel paused. Wedding-related. The word landed heavily. Amanda had gotten married last year. A large wedding. Elegant. Expensive. Our parents had contributed. Happily. Proudly. But not everything had gone through them. She charged part of it to the company, Rachel continued. Under brand exposure. I closed my eyes. That's not exposure, I said. That's theft. Legally, it depends on intent and documentation, Rachel replied. But ethically, it's indefensible. I didn't respond. That night, Amanda cooked dinner. It was the first time in weeks she'd used the kitchen while I was home. She moved carefully, deliberately, as if trying to reclaim normalcy through routine. She set 2 plates on the table. I thought we should eat together, she said. I sat. We ate in silence for several minutes. The clink of silverware felt louder than usual. Finally, she spoke. You always wanted this, she said. I looked up. Wanted what? To be in charge, she said. To be the responsible one, the steady one. That's not what this is, I replied. She smiled faintly. You tell yourself that. I took a breath. Why did you do it, Amanda? She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. I couldn't watch it fall apart, she said. The company. Dad. Everything. So you decided to take it, I said. I decided to hold it together, she snapped. You think your way is the only way? No, I said. I think consent matters. Her eyes flashed. Consent is a luxury in a crisis. Control is not care, I said quietly. She pushed her chair back. You don't get to lecture me. I'm not, I replied. I'm explaining why this happened. She stood, hands shaking. You think you're better than me. I met her gaze. I think you were afraid. And instead of asking for help, you took power. She laughed bitterly. And you took it back. No, I said. I stopped you from taking more. She left the table without another word. 2 days later, Harlan called an emergency meeting, not with Amanda. With me. There's been an attempt to move funds, he said, after the suspension. My stomach dropped. From where? A dormant account, he replied. One your sister believed wasn't monitored. Was she successful, I asked? No, he said, but the attempt was logged. I leaned back in my chair. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Harlan said carefully, that the review may escalate into a formal inquiry. And Amanda? I asked. She'll be notified, he said, and advised to seek independent counsel. I thanked him and hung up. That evening, Amanda didn't come home. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I sat in the living room with our father, watching a game he didn't really follow anymore, listening to the familiar rise and fall of the commentators' voices. I thought about how easily lines blur when no one enforces them, about how quickly love becomes leverage when fear enters the room. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think this is over. It isn't. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I placed the phone face down on the table, because whatever Amanda planned next, it wouldn't be quiet, and it wouldn't be contained. And for the first time since this began, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about who she was willing to become to keep control, and how far she was willing to go. Amanda came home the next morning like nothing had happened. No explanation. No apology. She set her bag down by the door, took off her coat, and walked into the kitchen to make coffee, as if the message from the night before hadn't been sent at all. You didn't sleep here, I said. She shrugged without turning around. I needed space. From what? I asked. From being monitored, she replied, that word again, as if accountability were surveillance, as if rules were an insult. I watched her carefully. Her hands were steady, her posture relaxed. too relaxed. She wasn't rattled. She was regrouping. "I spoke with Thomas Harlan this morning," I said. She paused, just for a second. "Oh?" she said lightly. "He's escalating the review," I continued. "There was an attempted transfer after your suspension." She turned then, slowly, her face unreadable. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "You don't have to," I replied. "The system logs do." Her mouth tightened. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm preparing." She scoffed. "For what? You think they're going to hand you a medal?" "I think they're going to hand the truth to a third party," I said. "And that scares you." Her eyes flashed. "You always think you're so calm." "I'm practiced," I said. "There's a difference." She stepped closer. "You wouldn't even be here if it weren't for me stepping up when Mom got sick." "That's not true," I said. "You stepped in. You didn't step up." Her hand trembled slightly. She noticed, pulled it back. "You don't know what it's like," she said, "to be expected to lead, to carry everyone." "I do," I replied. "I just didn't confuse it with ownership." She laughed sharply. "You're unbelievable." "No," I said. "I'm documented." She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head and walked out. At the office, the atmosphere tightened. Thomas Harlan's review had shifted from procedural to forensic. He requested IT logs, bank access histories, email metadata, things people only notice when they're about to be noticed themselves. Amanda stopped coming in entirely. Instead, her lawyer did. His name was Victor Hale. Polished, confident, the kind of man who spoke as if everything were negotiable. He requested a meeting with me. Rachel advised against it. Not alone, she said, and not without a purpose. So we met in a conference room with glass walls and no privacy illusions. Victor smiled as if we were old friends. "This doesn't have to get ugly." I folded my hands on the table. "It isn't. Your sister made mistakes," he said smoothly, "but she acted under pressure. Emotional distress, family obligation. She falsified authority," I replied, "and attempted to move funds after suspension." He waved a hand. "Intent matters." "So does pattern," I said. He leaned forward. "What do you want, Natalie?" The question wasn't hostile. It was transactional. "I want the company protected," I said. "And I want my role restored. Permanently." "And your sister?" he asked. I paused. "I want her accountable." He smiled thinly. "That's vague." "No," I said. "It's final." The meeting ended without resolution. 2 days later, the letter arrived. Not from a lawyer, from my father. Or rather, from his handwriting. Amanda had found an old letter he'd written years ago. Before the stroke. Before the illness. Before any of this. She left it on my bed. "Natalie, if you're reading this, it means I didn't say this clearly enough when I could. You have always been the steady one. Not loud, not demanding, but present. I hope you never mistake that for weakness. The world will try to. Don't let it. Love, Dad." My hands shook as I folded the paper. That letter wasn't meant as a weapon, but Amanda had used it like one. That night, I locked my door. Not because I was afraid of her, because I was done sharing space with someone who no longer respected it. The escalation came faster after that. Thomas Harlan called me late one evening. "There's evidence your sister attempted to backdate approvals," he said. "We've confirmed it." "What happens now?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "The court will be notified. This will no longer remain internal." "And Amanda?" I asked. "She'll be named," he said. I closed my eyes. When I told Rachel, she didn't sound surprised. "She crossed a line," she said. "Now the line is visible." Amanda called me that night. Over and over. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "You think you're saving something," she said, her voice tight. "But you're destroying our family." I deleted it. Because families don't collapse when the truth comes out. They collapse when lies are protected. The next morning, the notice was served. Formal, legal, unavoidable. Amanda was barred from the premises pending investigation. She packed her things and left while I was at work. When I came home, her room was empty. The silence she left behind was heavier than her presence ever had been. And as I stood there, in a house that suddenly felt more honest without her in it, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence, and it was only halfway through. The house changed after Amanda left, not in obvious ways. The furniture stayed where it was. The walls didn't echo. but the air felt different, like a pressure system had finally moved on. I didn't realize how tense I'd been until that tension was gone. For the first 2 days, I kept expecting her to come back, to hear her heels on the tile, to feel her presence before I saw her. When that didn't happen, something in me loosened. At the office, the investigation became official. Thomas Harlan no longer worked quietly behind closed doors. Court notices were posted. Financial institutions were contacted. A temporary injunction froze several accounts connected to the attempted transfers. Employees knew something serious was happening. They didn't know details, but they felt the gravity. People spoke more carefully. Meetings ended on time. Decisions were documented twice. Order returned. Not because anyone demanded it, but because uncertainty was no longer tolerated. One afternoon, Rachel called me into a conference room and closed the door. "There's a development," she said. I braced myself. "Good or bad?" "Both," she replied. "Amanda has filed a statement." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. "About what?" "She's claiming coercion," Rachel said, "that you manipulated the process to remove her." I exhaled slowly. "Of course she is." "She's also alleging that you were emotionally unstable after your mother's death," Rachel continued. "That your judgment was impaired." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. "What does that mean for the case?" I asked. "It means they'll try to shift the narrative," Rachel said, "from facts to feelings." "And?" I asked. "And facts are still facts," she replied. "But we need to be ready." That evening, I visited my grandmother. She lived in a small house outside town, the same one she'd lived in for 40 years. When I walked in, she looked at my face for a long moment before speaking. "She's gone," she said. "Yes," I replied. She nodded once. "Good." She was never going to stop. We sat at the kitchen table, drinking tea. "She called me," my grandmother said. "Your sister." I looked up. "What did she say?" "That she was being pushed out," she replied. "That you turned against her." "And what did you say?" I asked. My grandmother smiled faintly. "I asked her why she needed to take so much to feel secure." I felt a quiet wave of gratitude. "She didn't answer," my grandmother continued. "She never does." The court date was set for mid-May. Not a trial, a hearing. Limited scope, but enough to make everything public. I didn't attend in person. Rachel advised against it. "Let the documents speak," she said. So I stayed at the office, working, while the hearing unfolded across town. When Rachel called afterward, her voice was steady. "They weren't kind," she said. "To who?" I asked. "To her version of events," she replied. The judge questioned the timing, the notarization, the attempt to move funds after suspension. "And Amanda?" I asked. "She looked surprised," Rachel said. "That's usually the moment people realize their confidence wasn't evidence." The court ordered a full forensic audit. Not internal. Independent. Amanda's counsel requested a settlement discussion the same afternoon. Rachel declined. "They're moving too fast," she told me. That usually means fear. The audit took 6 weeks. 6 quiet, exhausting weeks where every transaction was reviewed, every email traced, every decision placed under a microscope. I kept working. I kept caring for our father. I kept my life narrow and intentional. Then the report came back. Amanda had authorized personal expenses through the company. She had misrepresented authority. She had attempted to circumvent the fiduciary review. No criminal charges were recommended, but civil penalties were. And she was formally removed from any operational role. The board ratified the decision unanimously. I sat alone in my office after the vote. I didn't feel relief. I felt grief. Not for the outcome, for the relationship that never really existed in the way I'd believed it did. That night, Amanda emailed me. Not through lawyers. Directly. "You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it." I stared at the screen. Then I typed back one sentence. "I got what I needed." I didn't send anything else. Because this part of the story wasn't about winning. It was about standing still while the truth finished moving. And I knew, deep down, that Amanda hadn't reached the end of her choices yet. She had only reached the end of her access. The rest was up to her. Amanda didn't disappear after the ruling. She faded. That distinction mattered. She didn't make a public scene. No social media posts, no dramatic statements. Instead, she began calling people quietly. Former colleagues, distant relatives, Anyone who would still answer. I heard about it secondhand. She's telling people she was forced out, Diane said carefully when she stopped by my office one afternoon. That you orchestrated everything. I nodded. Of course she is. But, Diane added, lowering her voice, it's not landing the way she expects. That was new. Amanda had always relied on certainty, on the idea that if she spoke confidently enough, people would follow. But confidence without access is just noise. The company moved forward. The audit forced changes that should have happened years ago. Clearer controls, separation of duties, formal approval chains. It wasn't punishment. It was maturity. Employees noticed. So did vendors. One longtime supplier pulled me aside during a site visit. Things feel steadier, he said. Less rush. I thanked him and made a note. Stability is quiet. That's how you know it's real. The first real test came in June. A competitor reached out with an acquisition offer. Not hostile, strategic. They wanted our distribution network, our brand loyalty. They assumed we were weakened by internal conflict. Rachel brought the proposal to my office. You don't have to entertain this, she said. I know, I replied, but I want to read it. The offer was generous. Enough to change my life. Enough to make everything easier. It was also wrong. They wanted to strip the company down. Layoffs, consolidation. Our parents' name reduced to a footnote. I declined. Politely. Firmly. When word got out, something unexpected happened. People rallied. Employees thanked me. Vendors expressed relief. The board stopped hedging. Leadership doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself in moments like that. A week later, I found something in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single document. A copy of the wedding reimbursement claim. Highlighted. Annotated. With a note scribbled in the margin. If this goes public, she's finished. It wasn't a threat. It was a suggestion. I stared at the page for a long time. Then I shredded it. I wasn't interested in finishing Amanda. I was interested in ending this. That decision came back to me faster than I expected. Amanda showed up at the house one evening, unannounced. She looked thinner, less composed. Her confidence had turned brittle. I just want to talk, she said. I didn't step aside. About what? About us, she said. About what's left. I considered it. Then I opened the door wide. We sat in the living room, the same one we'd grown up in. Our father slept upstairs. The house was quiet. I never meant for it to go this far, she said. You did, I replied. You just didn't plan for resistance. She flinched. I'm not asking for the company, she said quickly. I know that's over. What are you asking for? I asked. Her voice dropped. Alone. There it was. Not reconciliation. Not accountability. Survival. I'm in debt, she continued. Legal fees, personal expenses. I need help. I sat back. And you came to me. Yes, she said, because you're the only one who can. I shook my head slowly. That's not true. It's just convenient. Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones, this time. You're really going to let me fail? She said. I met her gaze. I'm going to let you live with your choices. Silence stretched between us. You always were like this, she said bitterly. Cold when it mattered. No, I replied. I was quiet. You mistook that for permission. She stood abruptly. You think you're better than me. I think I'm done rescuing you, I said. She left without another word. I locked the door behind her. That night, I slept deeply. Not because I was free of guilt, because I had finally understood its proper size. The next morning, Rachel called. Amanda's attorney is requesting mediation, she said. Final settlement. What kind? I asked. Non-financial, she replied. She wants a statement. Mutual non-disparagement. Closure. I smiled faintly. Tell them I agree. Rachel paused. Really? Yes, I said. On my terms. Because I knew something Amanda didn't. Closure isn't something you ask for. It's something the other person grants when they no longer need anything from you. And I was closer than ever to that place. Closer than she'd ever been. The mediation took place in a small office overlooking the courthouse parking lot. Neutral ground, neutral furniture, neutral language. Amanda arrived 10 minutes late. Not dramatically, just enough to remind everyone that she still believed timing was something she controlled. She looked different. Not undone, but stripped of polish. No designer bag, no careful styling. Just a plain blouse and tired eyes that kept scanning the room as if measuring exits. Her attorney spoke first. "We're here to resolve outstanding tensions and prevent further reputational harm," he said smoothly. I let Rachel handle the response. "My client agrees," she said, "with clear boundaries." Amanda glanced at me. "I just want this to stop." I met her eyes. "Then listen." The mediator outlined the framework. No admissions of guilt. No financial exchange. Mutual non-disparagement. No further contact except through counsel, if required. Amanda nodded quickly. Too quickly. "I'll agree," she said. "I just want to move on." Rachel slid a document across the table. "One additional clause," she said, "requested by my client." Amanda frowned. "What clause?" Rachel looked at me. I spoke. "You will not reference the company, the audit, or my name, publicly or privately, as part of your version of events," I said. "Not as a warning, not as a lesson, not as a victim story." Amanda's mouth tightened. "That's unreasonable." "No," I replied. "It's final." Her attorney leaned in and whispered something to her. She listened, jaw clenched. "What do you get?" Amanda asked me directly. "I get peace," I said, "without distortion." "And I get silence," she said. "You get distance," I replied. "Silence is optional." The mediator watched carefully. Amanda's shoulders slumped. "Fine." The agreement was signed within the hour. No handshake, no apology, just paper. As I walked out of the building, I felt lighter in a way I hadn't expected. Not relieved, released. That afternoon, something else happened. The board called an emergency meeting, not because of Amanda, because of me. I took my seat at the end of the table, notebook in front of me, prepared to listen. "We want to formalize your role," the chairwoman said. "Permanently." I didn't answer right away. "Operations director," she continued, "with expanded oversight authority." I looked around the room. Familiar faces, steady expressions. "You don't need to decide today," she added. "I already have," I said. I accepted. Not because I wanted power, because I understood responsibility. That evening, I went home and cooked dinner for my father. He ate slowly, methodically, unaware of the decisions being made around him. "You're calm," he said suddenly. "I am," I replied. He nodded, satisfied. Weeks passed. The company stabilized. Growth returned quietly. No headlines, no drama. Amanda kept her distance. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo, a job offer letter, entry level, far from home. Underneath it, one sentence: "I guess this is starting over." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, "It is. Nothing more. Nothing less." That night, as I sat on the porch and watched the sun drop behind the trees, I thought about the word revenge. This wasn't it. Revenge wants witnesses. What I had chosen wanted endurance. There's a difference. And I had finally learned which one lasts. Autumn came quietly that year. No sudden chill, no dramatic color change. Just a slow cooling that made people reach for sweaters without noticing when the season had turned. That was how my life felt too. Less sharp, more settled. The company adjusted to the new structure faster than anyone expected. Clear authority does that. When people know who is responsible, they stop guessing, they stop hedging. Work becomes work again, not a performance. I didn't announce changes. I documented them. Processes tightened. Budgets clarified. Promotions earned instead of promised. One by one, small corrections added up to something solid. That was when the second betrayal surfaced. It didn't come from Amanda. It came from someone I trusted without hesitation. His name was Mark Ellison, our CFO. He'd been with the company nearly as long as my parents. Calm, reliable. The kind of man who spoke slowly and never raised his voice. The audit team flagged an inconsistency in quarterly reports. Minor at first, a rounding issue. Then a pattern. Rachel brought it to me quietly. "Before we do anything formal," she said, "you should look at this yourself." The documents were clean on the surface. Too clean. Numbers balanced perfectly in a way real life rarely does. Expenses categorized just slightly off, always within acceptable margins. Someone had been smoothing risk, not stealing, hiding. I called Mark into my office. He sat across from me with the same steady expression he'd always worn. "You wanted to see me?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "About the supplier credits." He didn't blink. "What about them?" "They've been deferred repeatedly," I said, "without disclosure." "That's standard cash flow management," he replied. "Not without board approval," I said. He paused then, just a fraction too long. "I assumed flexibility," he said. "Based on what?" I asked. He folded his hands. "Based on history." There it was, the ghost of Amanda's authority, the habit of decisions made without consent. "How long?" I asked. Mark looked at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Since before your mother passed," he said. "She didn't want to worry you." My jaw tightened. "So you decided to manage perception." "I decided to protect morale," he said. "You decided to lie," I replied. The room went still. "I'm not accusing you of theft," I continued, "but I am accusing you of misrepresentation." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." "What I don't see," I said, "is why you didn't come to me." "You were grieving," he said. "And Amanda." "Was not the standard," I said. He looked down. "I need your resignation," I said calmly. "Effective immediately." He didn't argue. That told me everything. The news rippled quietly through the company. No scandal, no panic, just a recalibration. That night, I sat alone in the living room and thought about trust. How it decays not with malice, but with convenience. People don't always betray you because they want more. Sometimes they betray you because they think you won't notice. The call from Amanda came a week later. I didn't expect it. "I heard about Mark," she said. "Yes," I replied. "So now you're cleaning house," she said. "I'm setting standards," I replied. She was quiet for a moment. "You know," she said finally, "you're not wrong. You're just relentless." I smiled faintly. "No, I'm consistent." She laughed softly. "That's worse." "Are you calling for a reason?" I asked. She hesitated. "I wanted to tell you I got the job." "That's good," I said, and meant it. "It's not glamorous," she added, "but it's mine." "That matters," I replied. We ended the call politely. No warmth, no hostility, just distance that no longer hurt. That night, I opened my parents' old desk drawer and found a notebook I hadn't looked at in months. My mother's handwriting filled the pages. One line stood out. "Leadership isn't about who stands with you when you're loved. It's about who remains when you're no longer convenient." I closed the notebook. Outside, leaves skittered across the porch, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt something close to certainty. Not about the future, about myself. The first winter snow came early. It dusted the parking lot outside the office before sunrise, thin and quiet. The kind that melts by noon, but still manages to change how people move. Cars slowed. Footsteps softened. Everyone paid a little more attention. I liked mornings like that. They reminded me that momentum didn't have to be loud to be real. By then, my role was no longer questioned. Not openly. Decisions came to my desk without hesitation. Problems were brought to me early, before they became stories people whispered about. Authority had settled, not because I demanded it, but because I used it consistently. That consistency was tested when the letter arrived. It wasn't from Amanda. It was from the estate attorney who handled my parents' personal affairs. A man I'd spoken to only twice since my mother's funeral. His name was Lawrence Bell. Old school, precise. He requested a meeting. Not urgent, but deliberate. We met in his office the following afternoon. He didn't waste time. "There's an addendum to your parents' will," he said, folding his hands on the desk. "One that was never executed." I felt a flicker of tension. "Why?" "Because it required agreement from both daughters," he replied. "And it was never finalized." "What was it about?" I asked. He opened a file and slid a single page toward me. A succession clause. Not for the company, for the house. The family home where I now lived with our father. They wanted to place it in a trust, Bell said, with shared oversight. I read the page slowly. The intent was clear. They wanted to avoid exactly what had happened. Conflict, power plays. One child leveraging proximity over another. "Why am I seeing this now?" I asked. "Because your sister requested a copy last week," he said. I looked up. "What did she say?" "That she wanted closure," he replied. "She wanted to understand what your parents intended." "And?" I asked. He met my gaze. I told her the truth. That intent without execution is just conversation. I nodded. She asked if it could still be enacted, he continued. And? I asked again. No, he said. Not without your consent. I leaned back. Thank you for telling me, I said. He hesitated. You should know something else. I waited. Your parents discussed concerns about favoritism, he said carefully. They worried that one of you might feel erased. I didn't need him to say which one. They trusted you to be fair, he added. Even if that fairness cost you something. I left the office and walked the long way back to my car. The snow had melted into slush. The world looked less clean than it had that morning. More honest. That evening, Amanda showed up again. Not unannounced this time. She texted first. Can I come by? Just to talk. I waited 10 minutes before replying. Yes, 1 hour. She arrived exactly on time. We sat in the kitchen, coats still on, hands wrapped around mugs neither of us drank from. I spoke to the estate lawyer, she said. I know, I replied. She nodded. I wanted to understand what Mom and Dad were trying to do. And? I asked. She exhaled slowly. They were afraid of me. I didn't correct her. They thought I'd take too much, she continued. And they were afraid you'd give too much. That landed. I didn't come here to argue, she said, or to ask for anything. Then why did you come? I asked. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Without performance. For the first time in months. I needed to see if there was anything left, she said. I considered that. There is, I said, but it doesn't look like what it used to. She nodded. I expected that. We sat in silence for a moment. I don't need forgiveness, she said finally. I just need to stop being the villain in my own head. That's work only you can do, I replied. She smiled faintly. You always were better at endings. No, I said. I just learned how to leave doors closed. She stood. At the door, she paused. I am proud of you, even if I don't like how it happened. I know, I said. That's enough. After she left, I stood alone in the kitchen and felt the weight of the year settle into something manageable, not resolved, integrated. The next morning, I signed the final documents, formalizing the company's long-term governance structure. Clear lines, clear limits. No room for quiet takeovers. As I put the pen down, I realized something. This wasn't the end of the story, but it was the end of being pulled into someone else's version of it, and that was more than enough. The year ended without ceremony. No final confrontation. No dramatic reconciliation. No moment where everything tied itself neatly into a bow. Just days stacking on top of each other. Until one morning I woke up and realized I wasn't bracing myself anymore. That was how I knew it was over. The company closed for the holidays the week before Christmas. I stayed late on the last day, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The building was quiet, lights dimmed, desks cleared of half-finished coffee cups and loose papers. I walked the floor slowly, past apartments I'd once been locked out of. Past offices where decisions used to be made without me. Nothing pulled at me anymore. When I got home, my father was asleep in his chair, a blanket folded over his knees the way my mother used to do it. I adjusted it without waking him and stood there for a moment, watching his chest rise and fall. We had survived something. Not heroically, not publicly, but completely. Christmas came and went without Amanda. She sent a card. Simple. No explanations, no expectations. I placed it in a drawer with other things that no longer needed my attention. In January, the board approved the final restructuring plan. My role was confirmed. Oversight procedures were locked in. Succession planning was documented in a way that left no room for assumption or improvisation. I signed the last page and slid the folder into the cabinet. That was the moment it hit me. The revenge wasn't the audit. It wasn't the suspension. It wasn't watching my sister lose control. The revenge was permanence. I had outlasted the manipulation. I had refused to perform emotion for people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I had taken back authorship of my own life without raising my voice once. Amanda moved on. So did I. Months later, I ran into her by chance at a grocery store halfway between our two towns. We exchanged polite hellos. Nothing more. No tension, no longing. Just acknowledgement. That, too, was a kind of ending. One evening in early spring, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of wine, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. I thought about how often women are taught to keep the peace at the cost of their own clarity, how often loyalty is rewarded with erasure, how quietly control hides behind the word love. I had learned something the hard way. Being calm does not mean being weak. Being patient does not mean being available. And being family does not mean being entitled. My name is Natalie Crowell. I was excluded, underestimated, and strategically pushed aside by the person who knew me best. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't expose her publicly. I documented. I waited. I acted. And when the power finally shifted, I didn't chase it. I stabilized it. If there's one thing I took from all of this, it's this. Boundaries don't destroy families. They reveal which ones were built on control instead of respect. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been sidelined, manipulated, or quietly erased by people who claim to love you, you're not alone. And you're not wrong for choosing yourself. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. I read every comment, and sometimes the quiet ones say the most.